Hey guys, it's Helk here with Badfish. We're going to be talking about some stuff today on the Limit Break podcast here. So we've got a couple of topics. We're going to be talking about Final Fantasy XIV, mainly Shadowbringers, and also the newly announced, not so newly anymore, as I've been pushing back this podcast stupidly, but we actually have more information on it now with Final Fantasy XVI slated for release. Who knows? It could be end of next year. It could be the year after. My money is on the year after. I'm going for 2022, but who knows? Maybe they have a lot more stuff on there. But we'll talk more about that. So like I said, today we got Badfish on here, so we're going to talk about this. So let's dive right into 14. We were just having some general Final Fantasy discussion. We'll kind of roll some of that B-roll at the end of the podcast so that you can hear some of that. When it comes to as we approach 5.4 version 5.4 for Final Fantasy XIV, which would be the end of Shadowbringers, I think that in 0.4 they might have like a half update to kind of wrap it up. But usually, I think that this is kind of where they'll end their the actual expansion itself. Let's get your thoughts on what you've thought of Shadowbringers so far, Badfish.
Yeah, so I really enjoyed it. I originally started off. I played Final Fantasy XIV, a Realm Reborn. I never played the original 14.
Same.
But I started when A Realm Reborn first came out. Picked it up, played it for. I don't know. I got Dragoon up, or I got Lancer up to 30. I got Marauder up to 15, and then I was like, I'm super bored of this because like A Realm Reborn's level grind was very, very tough. So I stopped playing it, and I would pick it up every now and again because I'm really bad with canceling subscriptions. And so I first started playing it again when it was after Shadowbringers had been out for like 3 months. And so I pushed all the way up to 80, which wasn't too bad. I'm going to say, like, I played a lot of Warcraft. Like, I probably have like 25,000 hours in Warcraft, and I hate leveling. There's a reason why I only have three characters. That's it, because I just hate leveling. I actually like playing the end game, and I enjoyed the leveling process in 14. So I got up to Shadowbringers, and playing through the other expansions, I heard what people said, like A Realm Reborn is pretty average. Heavensward's amazing. And then you get to, was it Stormblood? Stormblood's awful. And then you get to Shadowbringers, and it's one of the best Final Fantasy games ever. And I really do agree with that, mostly because that's where I played most of the end game at, was in Shadowbringers. And I feel like that's when they figured it out. Like, that's when Square Enix really figured out, like, what do we want this game to be? The raids were good, the story was good, the leveling experience was fine. Everything about it was, it felt like they've kind of fleshed the game out, and they know what they want to do with it. And that's why, like, I actually really enjoyed it. I would put it as my favorite expansion out of all of the Final Fantasy expansions.
Mm-hmm. No, I agree with with a lot of what you just said. There are some things that, so I'll describe my Final Fantasy XIV journey. So I started playing when A Realm Reborn came out. A friend of mine was like, yeah, I'm going to play with you. We got to 50 and he quit. In A Realm Reborn, no update, none of the updates, not Leviathan or anything like that. He just was done. And I was like, okay, well, I guess I'm alone playing this. So you find, a free company and everything, and you make friends and all that, the social aspect of the game. So I kept on playing throughout A Realm Reborn, and I kept on playing through, and I kept on leveling, and I was playing Dragoon then. That was my main class. And I really love, because I had somebody like sitting next to me a lot of A Realm Reborn, it made it very easy to get through, because I'd be talking just, with them and everything, and during some of the, because it really is a text dump at times with, with a lot of those quests, and I think they've cured that a lot of A Realm Reborn in Shadowbringers with subsequent updates and everything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
So
my wife just leveled through, and her journey to get past kind of the post A Realm Reborn content, like the 2 point whatever patches,
yeah,
it went so much better. Like she actually out leveled the story content, which was pretty crazy.
that is, yeah. Well, that's cool. So I really enjoyed the Heaven's Word initially. I really enjoyed Heaven's Word initially. I'm not a big endgame raider. I'm not that type of player. I'm more into the casual content. So for me, Heaven's Word kind of stalled at one point, and that's when I kind of took a break because I was like, I'm not really feeling this. And I've played a lot of World of Warcraft, so I went back to that for a while. And Stormblood went on sale, so I was like, I haven't played this expansion. I'm going to play it. I actually enjoyed Stormblood a lot, but again, I'm a casual player. It wasn't, there was just some light stuff to do, new dungeons, which I love dungeons. That's something that I love, and I feel I'm going to make a point on that later on, and I'm taking a note to go back to that. And then Shadowbringers. Leading up to Shadowbringers, I was very excited for it, and it seemed to deliver in every manner that was possible. I felt that it came across as just everything I wanted it to be, and more. Where you're traveling to a new world, so to speak, it felt like a new world. It didn't feel like a new continent. It felt like a new world, and they did that really well. The story is tremendous. A lot of the dungeons are cool. I think that leading up to 5.4, and even the subsequent updates have been really good. It hasn't been like, it came in with, because, you fight Hades and everything, and that's a really great end to the original Shadowbringers content. But then moving on and doing what you do, provides a ton of awesome content, and it's really fun. I found the fighting the original Warrior of Light and everything, from Final Fantasy 1. That was great. That character model, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But just Shadowbringers has been exactly what I wanted out of an expansion. I think it definitely is the best expansion for the game, and I think it's probably one of the better modern Final Fantasy stories told recently. I feel like it was just that much more enjoyable than anything else I've been playing recently. For Final Fantasy related, I should say. With the I don't consider the 7 remake. It is a different story a little bit, but the Final Fantasy 7 kind of lives in a place of crystallization in my mind. 15, I was not the biggest fan of 15, but I can see why people do like it. And I think that it's an awesome world, so to speak, and it feels tremendous. But 14's Shadowbringers, whenever I think of, comparing things, because I played Final Fantasy 11 and I've played World of Warcraft, and the most fun I've had in an MMO before this was Wrath of the Lich King, which is my favorite expansion for WoW. And I feel like Shadowbringers equals it, if not tops the feelings that I get from there. The only reason why Wrath of the Lich King may be bigger in my head is because Arthas was always a bigger character than anything that they've created in this game to me. But that's just, that's lore. That's having that build up and everything. So,
well, a lot of it was because like Arthas started off in 3.
Right.
And he was such a big character in 3. And then you always knew he was there. And then when Wrath of Lich King comes out, Icecrown Citadel is hands down one of the greatest raids in the game. Mm-hmm. It's not my personal favorite, but it's definitely like top 5 for me. Mm-hmm. But I think that they did a really good job with it. I think that the way that it was fleshed out was really good. I feel like that's really hard to do with 14.
Yes.
Because like if it connected to another game, right? Let's say it was connected to, I don't know, what would be an example? Let's say it was connected to like 10.
Right.
And so you knew that like Jecht was still out there somewhere, and he was doing behind this or whatever, or you Yevon, or I don't know, just name any game and any person and they're still a character.
Mhm.
And then you just bring them back and they're this kind of like person that's behind it. Plus on top of that, like you had this larger than life character, plus the other raids were really cool. Yogg-Saron is one of my favorite old gods. And
Yep.
so you have Ulduar, which was an amazing raid, and it's just it brought so many good things, but it kind of splits the player base a little bit, because a lot of the things that happened in Wrath, or some of the quality of life things that were introduced in Wrath, are the complaints that people have today, but they didn't have a complaint with them back in Wrath, like Dungeon Finder and LFR were introduced then.
Mm-hmm.
But then you had other things that were kind of introduced in that expansion that were really positive things. And so I do feel like that was when kind of Blizzard found it out, like when they figured out like this is what we really want to make the game. And it's when like itemization became good and dungeons became polished. I mean, the big change in dungeons that I think was the best was Mythic Plus, which was introduced in Legion. And I that's kind of my big complaint about 14. I'm not a huge raider. I love doing end game raiding. Like I'm not casual. I'm like super, super high end. Like I want to do world first. I want to do all of that stuff. And when I played Warcraft, like we were pushing really high up Mythic Plus keys for a really long time. And it makes dungeons viable after the game. And I'd like to see them do something like that with Final Fantasy, but I don't really know if the player base is there. Like most of the time, the player base is extremely casual. Like it took me a really long time to get into a guild that actually had people that were like, yeah, we'll do some Savage content. And so I know that like that's such a tiny fraction of it. So I don't know if there's I guess like a player base for it, but I do think it would be really cool to have like an alternative to raiding in order to get gear, because you can do like a Mythic plus 15 and get equivalent gear to Mythic raids, which is the hardest level of raids, except for the last two bosses. They drop higher eye levels, but it would just be nice to have something where it's like you can get this gear from this alternate content and it doesn't take an entire week of preparation. It's something that you can, and it's timed. That's the really nice part, is it's timed. It's like you have 35 minutes to do this dungeon, and if you complete it, you get some pretty dope equipment at the end of it. And it would be nice to have something like that where it I guess expands your end game options, because PvP is, I love PvP, but I don't know. Final Fantasy PvP is just, I can't. and then you have raiding, and the raids are awesome. But then you have the Alliance raids, which are, I love Alliance raids. Then you have the regular raids, and then there's the ultimates, and there's so much stuff to do, but a lot of it is kind of out of reach of like ultimates you're not going to do in a pug.
Right.
And I just think that there needs to be like one more thing right there, because right now I'm one item off of best in slot for my Dragoon, and we steamroll dungeons. I mean, we even on the expert dungeons, it's 25 minutes and start to finish, and we're out of there. And so it just doesn't. It feels like one of those things like I have to do this to get my tomestones.
No, it doesn't. That if I'm going to complain about Shadowbringers, it's going to be the dungeon release drop off that has really occurred with subsequent expansions and everything. I understand that some people don't enjoy dungeons as much as I do, but at the same time, it doesn't mean that I don't want to run dungeons, and it doesn't, because running dungeons in A Realm Reborn was a really legitimate way to gear up. It was a way to get ready for different things, and there were so many different dungeons that you could get into a whole host of them. And then what happened in Shadowbringers is that your X roulette became 2 dungeons at one point. That's not a roulette, that's flipping a coin. And that was a little bit disappointing, because I'm like, okay, well, I'd like to, I would like to push something harder, but not have it be a raid necessarily, like you're saying. I don't know. I feel like because once you solve a dungeon, it's just like you just walk through it. It's okay, stand here. Yep. Okay, move there. Okay, and that thing's dead now, and it took 2 minutes, and
Yeah.
it becomes that's if I'm gonna complain about anything, it'll be that. I like dungeons. I want more. Release more
Yeah.
dungeons, Square.
What was the expert dungeon was the one that always started off on the turtle, and I
Yep.
can tell you the exact spot that you stand at for the
Hmm.
turtle to get off onto the bridge when it lands. And there's
Hmm.
because it's like it's 1.5 player models away from this bush, and
Right.
that's because that was the only expert dungeon for the longest time. And it's like it's time to ride on this freaking turtle again and do this dungeon. And like I know absolutely zero story about this dungeon at all because I've run it so many times that it's just kind of become like a part of the environment. It's like walking outside. Like I don't know the history behind the tree in my front yard, and I don't remember the history of this dungeon anymore because I've done it so much. And
Right.
it is that diversity because by having something like Mythic Plus, it brings those dungeons that you used to level with, it brings those up to your level 80 content because
Hmm.
there's obviously like a Realm Reborn is going to have more content because you have 1 through 50
Yeah.
in that, but you could still pack a lot of stuff in between 71 through 80. Like you
Hmm.
could still fit a lot in there. And just because a dungeon is level 72 doesn't mean that it's level 72. Like make that variable, have it scale with your character. Like your character gets X% stronger every level, have the dungeon scale with it so that if you're level 76 and you want to do this dungeon, then you're level 76 doing the dungeon, not level 76 doing a 71 dungeon. And
Right.
there's so many ways that they could fix that. But I feel like dungeons are kind of the untapped resource of all MMOs. Like all the MMOs that I can really think of, dungeons tend to be like the Achilles heel of like, we have to do this so that I can get gear so that I can go on to the good stuff, which is raiding or go on to PvP if it exists. But
Hmm.
it would be so much better if it's like, okay, dungeons are a viable in-game thing that I can do in order to kind of progress my character and progress the story or just to run for fun. Like it's nice actually running more than one dungeon. So Square,
Yes.
if you're listening, it's nice to do more than one dungeon. Because like I think now it's up to 2. So we've
Yep.
doubled it. We've doubled it. But if you had all of them that were end game viable, I think it would make it so much better.
Yeah, and they had that idea. They had the ideas of making hard modes for dungeons that they had previously released. You had Hullbreaker Isle, and then you had Hullbreaker Isle Hard, which is cool because you further a story that existed, you further content that existed, and you're able to reuse something. And that's I'm I'm okay with reusing certain things, and making them, giving them a fresh coat of paint and stuff like that. And get, like you said, making it a viable end game strategy to be like, I'm doing this because I'm not necessarily a raider, and I don't have time to kind of commit to that or whatnot. So it's yeah.
But that seems to be one of the things I've noticed about Final Fantasy versus WoW. And I compare the two a lot because
Hmm.
they're the two biggest and
Yeah.
they're the two best by far.
Yes.
But if you look at it like WoW centers around your guild. You are nothing without your guild because you get 2 professions and you get 1 job.
Hmm.
But in Final Fantasy, like you don't need a guild at all. You don't need a free company. And because I streamed it when I was leveling, and a guy in my chat who plays a lot of Warcraft said it feels like a single player game that you pay to play monthly, and that's really how the leveling experience kind of felt.
Hmm.
And so it was one of those things like, excuse me, with like dungeon or with Duty Finder and all of that, Duty Roulette. I didn't have to do anything at all. I just had to click a button, and then I was with a group of people that needed me. And yeah, playing DPS, I had to wait a little bit longer, but whatever. It's not all that far out there. And so I didn't need a free company. I could have survived without one.
Hmm.
And whenever I went into people's chats, and this is me being ignorant about it and saying, hey, I am into world first rating. What do I need to do to get into a world first free company? And they're like, oh, that doesn't exist. You want a static. You just need to find 7 friends to play with.
Yeah.
And there's no like you are culinary, so I'm going to go out and do botany and give you items for culinary so that you can make food for all of us. And we work together as a community to figure this raid out. But there's really not any of that. Because like we used to have jobs for benched raiders. Like if you're benched, you still have to do these things for us. Like you still have to make food for us, and you still have to make flasks, and you still have to prepare all of these things for the guild that's actually going to go into the raid. And I got benched a lot, but I mean, that's just it. Is like I had engineering. So I was making all of these items that, like, if someone had like a 485 helmet, I made them a 500 so that they had a little bit better gear going in. Or I would help with, I think I made the crow's nest sniper, or the crow's nest scope, which is an item that hunters use to augment their weapon to give them an extra 2% DPS. And so you had a job, but it doesn't really feel like that now. And I'm in a free company right now, and I'm not saying, like, I don't want anyone to take this the wrong way of like, don't join a free company, because I'm doing blue mage stuff, and with blue mage stuff you need a free company, because if you don't, and I'm in a huge one, I'm in Fat Chocobo on Primal or Exodus, and it's 400 some odd people. And so having that many, I could just type into the free company chat, like, anyone up for some blue mage stuff, and then we have to turn people down because there's so many. And so it helps to be in a free company to do some of that content. And especially leveling as a DPS, having someone to go into a dungeon with you, and that way you don't have to find a tank and stuff. But it feels like the game is kind of decentralized from a community until you yourself find that community that you want to be a part of. And I was in 2 free companies before, and both of them were dead. They just, no one wanted to play. No one wanted to do anything. No, I type into the free company chat and never get a response. And it did feel like they were playing it like a single player game. And when you'd ask, like, hey, do you guys want to run dungeons? Oh no, I'm with my static, man. I'm I can't.
Yeah, it's like you said, there's a lack of specialization at times in the game, unless you choose to be like, I'm not playing anything but this. I'm not gonna play anything but Dragoon, or and that's what I'm gonna do the whole time. And because the game does kind of encourage you during the lulls to kind of start doing different things, like during.
I have a 20-minute queue. Yeah. I'll throw on my black mage gear and level a little bit, just grind some mobs.
Exactly. I really enjoyed the crafting and gathering during this expansion, especially since there's now a gathering dungeon, which is kind of cool. I enjoy stupid stuff like that because I don't know, I like building things. I like the home ownership in the game and everything, and just doing all of that stupid crap.
Basically what the rest of us can't do because housing plots are sold out.
Yeah, exactly. I had to, I just happened, I had a house, and then I was looking for any plots available in Shirogane, I think is where it is, or and there was one that was about to go for sale months ago, and there was somebody AFK in front of it, like ready to buy it, and so I just stood there, and then when it went up for sale, I just bought it, and I'm sure that AFK person was just so livid with themselves. So now I have beachfront property, with in Shirogane and everything. So I'm never giving that up.
That's what I found weird is, like, here in Fort Wayne, there are desirable neighborhoods, just like with any place. Like, you want to live in Palm Beach and not West Palm Beach.
Right.
And I felt like it was the same exact thing with Final Fantasy. Like, you want the beachfront property in Shirogane. You don't want to live in, like, the lowlands of lavender beds where you're surrounded by mountains and you can't see anything except other people living higher up than you.
Yep. Exactly. So that's it. You just now that they're going to start auto demos again, it should free up some spots for everyone, which will be good.
Is there a benefit to owning a house over because I just use my free company room?
Not really. You get to decorate the entire house. That's it.
I hung a painting up in my room. That was about as fun. I think I have the teapot down only so that we can get the free company buff for raids. It's about as far as I got.
Yeah, I mean it's more of just it's playing house, in the game. Just being like, and I want this right here, and this is going to be my desk, and I'm going to put fish in this aquarium. And what it does is it encourages you to craft and gather, because you're like, well, I don't want to buy this crap, and then you're like, so how do I get it? you know.
Yeah, a friend of mine was he's real big into RP servers,
Mm-hmm.
and he I just discovered glamours because
Oh,
I
yeah.
got the room through your grand company where you train your squadron.
Yep.
And so I started dumping stuff into a glamour chest, and which I'm a little upset about that I found out you only have 400 slot limit. Like they
Mm-hmm.
just need to get rid of that.
Yeah, that's dumb.
And so I was in there like dumping stuff into it, and he came into chat and he's like, "Oh, I see you've discovered the true end game of glamour," and that's just it. Like I discovered the fashion. What is it? The fashion show?
Oh, yeah.
Or the fashion points every week.
Yep.
And I was like, how is this actually a thing? And it is. And there's a whole Discord of hundreds and hundreds of people that literally just sit there and compare fashions and trade them for points. And it's so cool. Like I think that part is, and I've never been into it, but I just think it's cool that it's there. Like I like that it exists, even though it's not something that I do myself.
Oh yeah, definitely. That's I really enjoy like very light, just being like, I want my red mage to look like this, and and then it's like, okay, well, just but yeah, there's an entire world there that I just I'm getting too old for, that I feel like it could really consume your time, and just become that. The game is tremendous. This expansion has been tremendous. And like you said, it is a much more, I feel that it does cater to the casual. And that's fine, because for me, casual is where I'm at. I've been playing World of Warcraft these past few weeks, because Shadowlands is coming out, and I'm like, well, I want to see it. I want to see what happens. And I don't want to kill Sylvanas, but it's going to happen, I mean, that's just going to happen in this. I didn't want to do this. You're forcing my hand here. And, I don't know if I'm going to be happy with it, because I didn't enjoy BFA. I enjoyed Legion a lot. So I'm like, well, maybe every other, maybe every other is going to be good from here on out.
The biggest thing with me was the farming. Like to be world first, like I was putting in 25 to 30 hours a week just on my main. And it was, and I remember one time I sat there and I logged in and I was like, I have to do islands. And it's not that I don't want to do islands. Like I have to do them because it's the best way to level my amulet. And I remember just sitting there staring at my computer screen. My wife comes over. She's like, "Are you okay?" And I was like, "I don't know if I want to do this anymore. Like, I really don't. Like, I'm putting in 30 hours a week just to get put on the bench because other guys are putting in 40 hours a week. And there were guys that were, they would play 12 hours a day on the weekends because that's what you had to do. You had to farm. And I remember I was doing you end up getting a cloak so that you can like, it was some resistance to the evil that N'Zoth had. And I remember I was in these I don't know what they were, the corrupted visions, I think is what they were called, or they're coalescing. There was some sort of like extra content you had to do. And this like fire spot appeared and I kept getting bounced around from fire spot and I couldn't control my character. And then he dies. And I'm just like, how does anyone find this fun? Like, how did anyone at Blizzard sit down and say, you know what, this is what we want from our game. We want some dude playing a demon hunter in Indiana to get frustrated and to smash his keyboard that I'm looking down at and is missing. Well, I mean, this is the tab key. So that came off. And then the control key is right next to it. It's like, how is this fun? And then that's when I switched I was like, I'm just going to switch over to Final Fantasy. And even though I do play the game, I want to play the game like really hardcore. Like they simplified the rotation of a lot of characters between the two expansions, between Stormblood and Shadowbringers. But that doesn't mean, even though they made it easier, it doesn't mean that it's more casual. It just means that casual players can actually like hit the rotations and do better. But there's still like, even though I feel like I'm really proficient with my rotation, I'm still like 3% off of the top DPS because they could do it without ever having to look down at their spell bar. And so making it more casual friendly is not a bad thing. Like people will always find a way to take something casual and to make it something hardcore. Like when I played StarCraft professionally back in the day, like
Mhm.
I didn't play it because I wanted to be pro. Like no one was pro back then. I went to a LAN party with 64 people and won a mouse pad.
Yep.
Like you can't make a living off of that. I played it because it was so much fun, and I still have fun playing it. Like I just played it yesterday, and it's, that when you look at like casual content, like there will be people that make it hardcore. You don't have to do that as a game company. And I feel like that's what Blizzard tried to do, was they were like, we have this pro scene with like former Method and all of these other teams. We need to cater to them because they bring in viewers, but we also need to have this separate content for everybody else, rather than just saying we're making one set of content and then letting the player base decide what they want to do.
Yeah. Yep.
And Final Fantasy is really good with that. Here's the raids. You
Yep.
guys decide if you guys want to do a world first raid, do a world first race. We don't really care. We're not involved in it. You do you, and it happens and it works.
Yep. The PvP is boring. I'm just gonna say that. Like I don't have any like it's. I think you really have to like get a group together, and that would be tough. And then you'd have to really want to, there's just no like impetus for me to ever. I used to play the PvP kind of regularly, and then at one point I was like, why am I doing this? Like, what is this giving me? like what am I getting out of this?
Wolf marks.
Yeah, wolf marks, and that's pretty much it. And like every now and again I'd kill someone, and I'd be like, oh yeah, that was cool. But then I'd be like, oh well, we're just one by one walking into death over here, and okay, so
yeah.
And now
I don't
we
know
lose.
enough about it.
Yeah.
Like I have like 200 matches. I don't know enough about it to form an opinion. I mean, it's fun. I had fun with the matches that I played, but I don't get it. Like I guess it's not my thing.
Yeah, I don't. I think that I just have to go to other games if I want PvP to be enjoyable. That's so. I think that as a hive mind, and as just as a group, I think that everybody's kind of we've fallen over ourselves for Shadowbringers because it's a great game. It's a great expansion. I think that they hit a home run. And as we move towards 5.4, I'm just like, so what happens after that? They've opened up this idea that you're traveling between worlds, so to speak, but I don't think you want to just keep on going, well, now you're going to this world, because then it becomes a stale, overuse. And I don't think Yoshi P would do that, because I don't see that being the direction for his game at that point.
Well, one of the cool things they did near the end of BFA was that they brought back 2 older zones. So Pandaria was Vale in Pandaria, and then I can't think of the zone that's south of Silithus, below AQ40 and all that stuff on the map.
Yep.
They brought those zones back, so now there's stuff to do there again, and that would be really cool to like, hey, rather than having this, you click on the map and it's an essay worth of stuff to click through to find out where you want to go. Let's revisit old areas, or even just expand upon those old areas. And I think that would be really good, because the map seems like it's really empty. Like the map feels empty because there's not a whole lot of stuff between each, like between the towns and things like that. The one that I'm thinking of is, I can't think of the name of it. It's where like the end game, or like the level 50-ish Dragoon quests are. You have like the closest Aetheryte node, there's like a road that connects those 2 towns, and there's not really much in between there, but there's like a few roads.
Yep.
It'd be cool just to add more stuff kind of into that area and just make the world feel like it's more of a world and not as empty. Or the awful gauntlet to get from Horizon to wherever you go to talk to Minfilia like 3,000 times. Like that area right there, it just, even though there's stuff there, it just feels like it's empty because you're just trying to dodge the mobs. Like, I don't want to fight you. I just want to go talk to her so that I can progress the story.
Yep. Vesper Bay. That's where it is. Yeah. No, I think that's a great idea. The story that's approaching, how we're going to see, what's his name, Zeno, again, kind of taking center stage once more. I don't know if I'm as excited for that. in 5.4, which is what I'm assuming. But, they've exceeded my expectations in each of these updates. So I don't know. I think I'm really going to enjoy the end of the end of this expansion, and wonder what they do for the game moving forward. I think they said that under this, this story will have at least one more expansion to it. So we'll see.
Yeah, it's better than just adding a new raid tier.
Yeah,
here's 5.4. Here's another raid tier. That's it.
Yeah,
Good
exactly.
luck.
Yeah, have fun.
It's nice to actually have content and something to do.
Yep, agreed. So I brought up Yoshi P, and we'll segue into Final Fantasy 16 discussion. I loved how Sony knew to open up their game footage with Final Fantasy 16. I thought that was a great idea to just go right into it, because I was like, I don't know if they're going to show anything on Final Fantasy, and then immediately it's 16 right in your face and in the game list and everything, and it's like, oh wow, okay, so I don't have to watch the rest of this, do I? But
it felt like remember when 10 came out, when the trailer was there? That's what it felt like. It brought me back to like high school Adam. I'm like watching this I bought a PC Gamer magazine or PlayStation magazine, and I got the little CD and I put it in, and I'm just like, this is what I need. And that's really what it felt like with 16.
Yes. Watching 16's visuals and everything, and watching some of the gameplay looks very 15-esque. Is what I was seeing. Maybe some refinement there to kind of the combat and everything. But I loved the setting. I am all about that kind of, that sword and shield setting. Instead of, steampunk or modern day. I'm always about, medieval times and stuff like that, and just, having people wearing, bulky armor, or dressing like brigands and stuff like that sort of thing. I really love how the game looks, and I mean it visually it's very, very popping, and I love that because as we move forward, that's really cool. It seemed to feel a much darker tone than sorry about that. It seemed to take on a darker tone than I've seen in most Final Fantasies, which is kind of interesting. I felt like, when you see the spray of blood hit the kid and everything, I was like, whoa! I was like, I don't remember Final Fantasy doing that, Well,
isn't it going to be the first M-rated Final Fantasy?
Yeah, I think so. And this isn't a numbered game, but could what was it? Typo was Typo mature?
I don't know.
I wonder.
I have it on my Steam. I don't think that it was. I guess it won't tell me on Steam, but yeah, it was. I know what you were talking about, because I saw the same thing in the trailer, and I'm just like, is this a Final Fantasy game, or is this like another medieval fantasy game that I can't think of any right now?
The vein of Dark Souls, or maybe something like that. That sort of thing. The character design, I was like, this looks very Final Fantasy. When you look at the faces of the characters, I'm like, this looks like generated from their sort of engines. Or not engines, but just utilizing their style of design. So
it might be the same engine, because I know that 13 was Crystal Tools, and Crystal Tools was really bad. That's why 15 took so long, because when it was versus 13, it was on Crystal Tools. So it might be the same engine as 14. Because I know that they wanted to develop a proprietary engine, and I think they did for 14. But and maybe Nier. I think maybe Nier used it, but I don't know if it could be the same one, and they're just like, we're going to squeeze one more game out of this engine.
Yeah, and it looks good. It looks fine. I don't need it to. I don't need them recreating the wheel to to get, to put out a new game. I'm excited for a new Final Fantasy. Is a new enumerated Final Fantasy, I should say. It's been one of those things where, it took a while for 15. 15 took a long time for us to get because, it didn't start off as 15. It wasn't 15 for a while. And then, so we had a trio of 13s. We had 14, which is a Final Fantasy game, but it's an MMO. I think that it kind of hurts when people say, oh, it's an MMO. So it's not a real Final Fantasy. I don't like that. But I can understand the idea behind them saying it like that. So, I mean, you had all the 13 games. 12 was a while back. And then, then you're going back into, when I was getting out of high school. And so now we're getting to 16, and I'm very excited to have just another Final Fantasy single player to be able to jump into. And with the way they're building up the world, it looks like it's going to be just like a ton of political intrigue. With all the different nations, you can really get some kind of the world seems big because they're making it big, in my opinion. It's not like oh, here are your three nations and one of them hates all the others and the other two team up, and no, it looks like there's quite a bit of intermingling there that can happen.
Yeah, and the other thing is when you make a world that huge, so you have 12, 13, and 15.
Yep.
12 and 15 did a really good job of explaining how the nations kind of hated each other through the story. 13 did it through data logs. And I think both of them worked. I think the reason that 13 had to do it through data logs is because they put so much into like the aesthetics of Final Fantasy 13, even though people hate it, like it's a beautiful game.
Oh, yes.
And that takes up, space. And a lot of the stuff on there, like the shadows and stuff, were rendered at higher resolutions than what the game could project in order to reduce the amount of anti-aliasing. And so it's an amazing looking game, and so they had to do data logs. 12 and 15 told it a little bit more through story. There was some like side stuff that you could do. I didn't do a whole lot of side content in 12. I did a lot in 15 just because I enjoyed 15. But when you were talking about the battle system, I remember one thing that someone said the worst thing that ever happened to Final Fantasy was Advent Children. Not because it was a terrible movie, but because every game wants to have like they try to emulate that fight between Cloud and Sephiroth at the ending of the movie. And they want to emulate that, and it just leads to these games that just don't handle very well. Like you have 12 where you do have a little bit of movement around the field and target selecting and things like that. And then you have 13, which is kind of a hybrid of them. And then you have 15 where you have full 360-degree movement. It feels like an MMO, except you're selecting what you want to do rather than lining up your rotations.
Yep.
And so I worry that it's going to be, because while I like the combat of 15, I do kind of miss the combat of 9 and 10 and even 12 to an extent. Even with 13, where you have a three-dimensional environment that your characters can move around, but then it's still menu based within that. Yep. And so I think that play style would be really great, because just let Advent Children go. I know it looked good, but you can't take a game and turn it into a movie, and you can't take a movie and turn it into a game. And I think that they just need to stop that.
Yeah. I mean, you're going to. I agree. I think that the one thing that was kind of a bit off-putting for me in 15 was just the style of action. You have all of this. You're not. It sounds weird to say it, but I don't necessarily need to be able to move around the field as much as as much as it gave me. I'd like to just attack that thing. And I understand, we're in a day where you're opening the game up to a greater audience, because 15 was a massive release for them, And by opening it up to the greater audience, you need people that, because a lot of people will say turn-based combat is not interactive. It takes you out of the game. People will say that. I don't think so. I think it just makes me think a little bit more. But I think that, there's a fair amount of gamers that believe that. Now, so it's like, okay, so let me be very actiony. Let me jump up there and then, warp there, and then let me dive down here, and so on and so forth, which is cool, but I felt like, I don't know, I just didn't, as much as it made me immersed, I didn't feel I was having more fun. So I don't know. Now it looked to be a little bit more slick in the 16. I mean, I have as much to look at as I can. It looked more slick in the trailer. It looked like the combat was more fluid than in 15. Because I felt like at times,
15 was really like, it felt really button mashy. And then, if you remember in 13, whenever your character got knocked down and whenever they were trying to get back up, it took them a long time for them to do an action. Mm-hmm. And it kind of felt like that, like, I don't want to call it like stagger, but it's like that hesitation kind of carried over to 15 a little bit. Mm-hmm. And so it made you feel helpless for a period of time. And so I think that you can do that with, maybe have just your character just auto attacks. Yeah. And then you use menus, or then it charges up like an ATB bar, so you can use like bigger hits, or you could combo stuff. So if you hit like a heavy hit and then 2 light hits, then you get access to like magic or a summon or whatever. Because I honestly can't even tell you how summons work in 15. Like, I have no idea. I just know that they happen randomly, and that they helped. But it, like, because I enjoyed the combat in 15 when it worked, and because like you were saying how it's nice that they're back in a medieval setting. Yeah, I kind of like the medieval setting, but at the same time, like, I'm always really fascinated in how, like, if my neighbor could use magic, how would I feel as a person, and like how would I interact with the world? Like, if I could use spells, or if I could do all of this stuff, like, how does that impact the world around me? I could just hold my hand out and summon a sword or whatever. And so I think that's kind of cool. But at the same time, when it is in one of those like prehistoric settings, or I say prehistoric, like they're throwing stones at each other. Right. But in like these medieval settings, I think that it adds a lot to what they can do, because then I guess like nothing is out of bounds at that point.
Right. No, yes, that does sound, that good point made there and everything. So it appears that there's a time skip and everything, because your character ages, from, the character aged in the trailer and everything. So, it looks a little bit very edgelord in his older form. I was like, oh boy. I was like, I don't know.
It happens. You know, Metallica came out between then, and you know, he's got a new style of music and stuff.
Yeah, he got very, very, wrote a lot of poetry and just,
But I mean, I think that's okay. So one of my big complaints with 15 was, and like, this is coming from someone who puts 15 in his top 5. And I know that like instantly now the internet hates me. So, but the biggest thing was, as soon as you're like, you know what, I'm going to go and I'm going to get this. There's like halfway through the game. I don't want to spoil it for a game that's,
4 years?
I guess the most recent. Yeah. But there's a part of the game where you leave your kind of core content or continent and then head out. And from there, you don't really head back and continue the game like you do. So the game is kind of split into the first half, and then the second half is kind of the end of the story. And so the problem is that there's a part where your character advances in age, and at that point, like, okay, all of those side quests that I did and all of that stuff, there's no going back to that. That's all done. And now I feel like I'm on a railroad or I'm on a train and I'm being railroaded down, and the only destination now is the final boss. And as long as they don't do anything like that, if it's like you play your younger self, or let's say because it's his older brother, I think,
Yep.
right? It's the main character's older brother,
Yep.
and you play him, and then all of a sudden the main character advances in age. Have that be like a demo, like this is how the controls of the game work, and then all of a sudden it's like 10 years later, and then here you are into the game proper. I think I could deal with that more than just like, we're just going to advance the story by 10-ish years and not fill you in anything that happened between that.
Or give you a text blurb for it.
Yeah.
I'd be like, no, show, don't tell.
Yeah. Well, because like at the end of 15, Iris turns into this like badass demon hunter, but you never get to see her. You never get to see her do any of that cool stuff. And it's like, that's what I want to be a part of. Like, I want to be a part of this world and not just like be railroaded around.
Yep. No, I totally agree. I think that the good thing is that there's a lot of possibilities with what they can do. And with having, he's not the director, he's the producer, right? The producer for 14, I believe, is the producer on 16. But I think that, so, I mean, with having him on that, and not necessarily being the director, it changes his kind of role. But I think they can really do a lot with this story. And I said, I try not to be negative immediately when I see something, because I'm like, that doesn't help you at all. That doesn't make you feel good. You gotta look at something and go, oh, that could be great, and it can be. And because if they look at what they did with 15 and they go, okay, this worked, this didn't, like you're saying, don't railroad the player into what they have to do. I think it would be, in a sense, almost interesting. And I'm not saying do this, but if you went back and forth in time, maybe that could be something odd to tell the story by moving it up and then having to go back in time. Not your character actually going back in time, because I hate time travel. But except when it comes to the Terminator. But but that's the only time I think that time travel's okay. Because it yes. But
yeah, it's such a cop out for any actual, like, we need to solve this problem.
Yeah.
Okay, what should we do? Oh, well, I mean, we just invented a time machine. Like, spoiler alert, if you haven't seen the Avengers, when they're like, we have time travel, I'm just like, no, please don't. Like, come up with something else besides like this happy ending. Just do something else besides time travel, please. I don't want it anymore.
Yep. Time travel is not something that I enjoy. Like I said, the only time, Terminator, I'm okay with it, but because I mean, you kind of need it for that to even be a.
But that's an integral part of the story, though. It's like Quantum Leap without, being able to leap around. Yeah. Like, it's just it's such an integral part of Terminator. But when it comes to like everything else, like if you're back in the prehistoric time, like, how does time travel have anything to do with it? Right.
Exactly.
Like, imagine if Kefka went to destroy the world, and then all of a sudden, you go and visit, Sabin, and he's just like, oh yeah, I've been chilling here with Mog and his time machine that he invented. So let's go back and fix this problem. Like, then it becomes really, really weird.
Yeah.
I think that 13.2 did it well. 13.2 did time travel well, because it treated each time like its own separate space while it was interconnected, but it still did it really well.
And you have games like Chrono Trigger that were built upon the time travel idea and everything. So if it's built upon it, that's fine. But anyways, I'm mostly thinking that, maybe, you go to you age up. Maybe there is a block of story that they don't explain immediately, and then you experience it in the past, at some point of the game. Maybe you do have to maybe the tale is told after the fact. It's one of those things.
Well, and that's fine, because like kind of thinking to a game I played recently. So I played the single player of Call of Duty Modern Warfare, and how they do it, where it's like, here's my past, and then all of a sudden now you're transported back into the past, into like a preteen person, and you get to experience stuff through their eyes and like actually control the game, rather than just like, here's a cutscene that our visual department came up with. So I think that doing that's a really good way to present the story.
Yes, I think that. Yeah, definitely. I think that's a great way to get story across. I think that there's so many possibilities with this. I thought the fight with the Dragoon in the beginning, or Lancer, whatever it was. I think it's a Dragoon, right? We'll call it a Dragoon.
Yeah.
That looked great. The visuals there, and I'm assuming that's early in the game. The way it looked, I think that there's, character design looks fine. I'm going to make fun of the main character's look as he gets older, but, whatever. A lot of eyeliner. But I think that they've presented a world, like I said, with so many nations. Now, you can go the opposite direction, whereas rather you're no longer having intrigue, you're having complications because your story becomes convoluted. But I don't feel like it would. I don't think that'll happen. You know what? I'm hoping that won't happen. That's going to be my main focus there. I think that by virtue, they're going to build the intrigue rather than building the, oh my God, this is so much information. I just want to click through this and get to killing something now. Because unfortunately that can happen in a game. You're just like, I don't care right now.
Yeah. Well, it's like comparing Final Fantasy VII to Final Fantasy VII Remake. Video Game Donkey did a video of it where he's like, in Final Fantasy VII, you fight through the battles to get to the story. In Final Fantasy VII Remake, you fight through the story to get to the battles. And so I hope I would rather have a better story, but also at the same time, like, there needs to be that delicate balance between like, here's the story and here's the gameplay, and they work together, rather than, it's just one big long cutscene with a couple fights thrown in every now and again.
Yeah, that would be disappointing if it came out like that. And again, I don't know why I have this blind faith in it to work, but Shadowbringers brought my opinion of Final Fantasy up again. Which is really great. So it makes me forget about the things that I dislike about. And the thing is that, like, I may be hard on 13 and 15, but there are positives to me even in those games. 13 is a beautiful game, and the combat, I really like 13's combat. A lot of people will have divisive opinions. I enjoyed the combat. I just didn't like the story, that's me. And 15, I felt had, that open world, having just this amazing kind of area, and pretty much just do it. I like that. Now if you can somehow make it all work, in my mind, or even just 90% of it work, and then I'll
but with Final Fantasy though, like, a bad Final Fantasy game is still better than most.
Like, I'll agree.
The new Marvel Avengers game, like, at least it's not that. Like, it's like, you look at 13 or for people who didn't like 15 and stuff, like, okay, yeah, they're still good games though.
Yeah.
They're just maybe they're not good Final Fantasy games. And so I think that's where you have to kind of draw that distinction of like, which is better, and where does it kind of fall at? Because the other series that I played before this was, because like, I'm really big into, like, I love the lore and the world surrounding stuff, was Metal Gear.
Yep. And
the Metal Gear games are amazing. And then they came out with Metal Gear Rising, and it's not just a bad Metal Gear game. It's just a bad game.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if you play that, every single person should play that game so that they can be like, what is this really? Mm-hmm. Like, they tried to do something and it didn't work, and the gameplay was bad, and the story was bad, and the graphics were pretty mediocre, and it was just bad. But then when you look at something like, for the people who are like 12 or 13 or 15, like, they're still good games. They're just not good Final Fantasy games. Mm-hmm. And Mass Effect is another one. Like all the Mass Effect games are really good, but when you only release 3, well, okay, except for Andromeda, let's not count that. But like Mass Effect 1, 2, and 3 are really good games, and so it shows that like you can make a really good game and a really good game series, and people that don't like 2. Like Mass Effect 2 is still a really good game, even though it is the worst of the Mass Effect games. But by default, there has to be a best Final Fantasy game and a worst Final Fantasy game. Like that exists. And we always talk about like, I saw a thing with a guy who was he was a mountain bike rider who was in an accident and he was paralyzed. And he's like, what is the top 100 para athletes look like? Like, what does that look like? And so, it's the same thing. Like, what is the top Final Fantasy game have in it? Is it kind of the pre 9 and before games? Is it the newer ones? Is it something that they haven't released yet? What does it look like? And so if the way that I go into them is I look at them as separate games because they are separate games. Mm-hmm. Oh, hey, it has a chocobo, so that means it's Final Fantasy 3.
Right.
Well, I mean, it's not. It's 16. It's what it is.
Mm-hmm. No, I think that yeah, and the funny thing is that like I do go back to games. Like when I first played 12, I didn't really enjoy 12. I went back and played 12, and I really enjoyed 12. And I was like, well, maybe history is a little bit, maybe being able to get some space from it and go back to it. Which happens with games. Like happens with MMOs, happens with other games. You get some space and then you come back to it, and you're like, yeah, this is fun. 12 did that for me. 13, I'm still having trouble going back to. Maybe 15 will eventually, warm my heart, warm the arteries, the coated arteries in my heart. And I'm hoping that 16 has a good feel to it. I intend to play 16 all the way through immediately, unless it is just bad. I'll take a week off and just play it. But it's one of those. I'm going to be optimistic. By the way, like we discussed this in the radio chat. The chocobos in this game, they showed chocobos. Those chocobos have forward-facing eyes, so evidently chocobos are predators in this game.
I looked at it and it scared me. Yeah. I didn't sleep well at night, and it's just like I don't like. They're supposed to be the fun trope. Like they're gonna come out with Moogles, and the Moogles are gonna have like red eyes, and like they're gonna be like Tonberries. Like they scrap with Tonberries on the weekend. Like I don't know if I like that direction.
Yeah, I know. I was like, wow, that thing is scary. Yeah. Because like in every other game, has the eyeball on the side. Very, very docile. This thing is gonna rip you open. So
well, maybe it'll serve like a 14 like combat role, and I think that would be cool because like I'm one of those morons that I grinded out my chocobo to get him up to rank 20. Nice. And like I don't know, I just love I think a lot of it is because like the min-max are inside of me. It's like I have to do this. Mm-hmm. But I think it would be really cool to have like a maybe like a chocobo companion or something. I don't know if there's like a party that you're going to form, like a permanent party, but like having like a chocobo as even just like a storage mechanism, or maybe like a fourth party member or fifth party member or sixth, depending on how many is in the full party and all of that. I think that would be something really cool, even if it's just there to provide like passive buffs, like you get a plus 5% if you get a preemptive strike or something stupid. I don't know, like maybe that's why they kind of have that bloodthirsty look to them, because they're going to be like a companion.
Yeah, no, that would be cool. Lots of possibilities there. All right, I think we'll start wrapping up just because I'm running out of time here. But anything that we should add here?
I think we kind of covered it. I mean, with the limited amount of information that we have, it's kind of tough to get into it. Plus, I'm not really a big, I don't know, like I don't look up a whole lot about a game before it releases. Like I'm excited about Cyberpunk, but I don't know anything about the world other than what we've seen in the cinematics, because like when you were born, no one sat down with you and said, okay, here's the history of everything up until when you were born.
Right.
Instead, you kind of experience it as you live.
Yep.
And so that's how I go about games. Like I want to play the game and experience the world and take in all the lore and stuff like that, rather than kind of reading about it beforehand and maybe building up like, you know, those expectations of like this is where the game should be at, and then you play it and it's like, well, it's not really like that. You know, it's like when you get to the end of Final Fantasy and then or like 7, and then you restart. It's like, I completely forgot that Midgar was a thing. Like, it's been so long since I've seen it. And so I usually don't like to look into it, but I am with the stuff that I've seen, and I watch the cinematics and I watch the gameplay trailers. I am very excited about it. I'm going to play it regardless of whether it's good or bad.
Yep.
Just because it's a Final Fantasy game, and I feel like it's a sunken cost fallacy at this point. Like, I have to. Like, I've played most of them. Yep. Actually, I played all of them. I finished most of them, so I just feel like it's another one to check off on the list.
Definitely. No, that'd be cool. Anything you want to plug at the end of this? Anything that you'd like to plug for yourself, your Twitch channel, anything?
Yeah, so I stream over on Twitch pretty irregularly. So twitch.tv/badfishsc. So I work as a teacher, and so I don't stream when school's in session. And so it's usually like during the summer only, or long breaks. So like winter break and things like that. But yeah, I have a YouTube channel that's the same name, and I play through all of the numbered Final Fantasies 30-minute episodes at a time every day at noon. And right now I'm doing 13, and I've done 3, 4, 12, and 15 so far, completely through.
Nice. So, and you know me, I'm just playing games or doing pixel art over in my Twitch channel. So, you know, we can, you know, I'm excited for more Final Fantasy stuff, and I'd like to revisit talking about 5.4 after it releases and after we've had time to digest and see what happens. Would you be up for that?
Yeah, I'm always down. I love talking about this stuff.
Cool. Alrighty, guys. Well, thanks for tuning in, and you know, these are fairly irregular, but maybe we can get them to be more regular. So until then, limit break. Bye.